else.
She called me just a translator in front of the entire department. Said Google Translate could do my job. Said I was a line item they could cut. I smiled, closed my laptop, and said 4 words. Good luck on Monday. And when Monday came, when their most important Japanese partners walked into that conference room and asked where I was, the room went so cold you could have heard a pin drop. $12 million.
Gone.
And I wasn't even in the building. If you have ever been the most important person in a room that refused to see you, if you have ever watched someone with half your experience and twice your arrogance take credit for work they couldn't begin to understand, this story is going to feel like justice served at exactly the right temperature. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, have you ever been dismissed by someone who had no idea what they were actually dismissing? Because Mary Cooper's story is about to remind every single one of us what it looks like when 17 years of invisible expertise finally becomes impossible to ignore. Let's get into it. Monday mornings have a particular quality when something is wrong. Not a dramatic, obvious wrongness. Nothing so considerate. Just a shift in the air pressure. A texture to the silence that doesn't belong there. The kind of feeling you have learned over years to trust. I sat at my desk in the translation department, both hands wrapped around my chipped ceramic mug, the one that said Queen of Syntax on the side, a gift from a client in Tokyo 3 years ago. The coffee had gone lukewarm. I hadn't noticed. I was watching the floor. The whole office had a buzz to it that morning. The particular combination of anticipation and dread that fills a space when people know something is coming, but nobody wants to be the first to name it. It had started 3 weeks ago, when the company announced we were getting a new CEO. I had worked at Grayson Manufacturing for 17 years. I had survived leadership transitions before, the nervous ones, the overconfident ones, the ones who lasted 6 months and left a trail of reorganized departments and bruised morale behind them. Transitions were part of the rhythm of corporate life. You learn to read them. You learn to wait. But the moment Marcus Bell walked through those glass doors, I knew this one was different. He was late to his own introduction meeting. Not fashionably late in a way that suggested importance. Late in the way that suggested he simply hadn't bothered to check the time. He arrived 15 minutes after the board chair had already navigated through the opening speech, while the rest of us stood around making polite conversation and trying not to check our watches too obviously. He strolled in like the meeting had been waiting for him, which, technically, it had. Expensive cologne. The faint, poorly concealed trace of something else underneath it. I have a good nose. I always have. It wasn't the remnant of a social evening. It was something more deliberate. Something functional. Liquid courage, applied before an entrance. He didn't smile when he was introduced. Not genuinely. His face operated in 2 modes, boardroom angles and rehearsed smirk, and he moved between them with the practiced ease of a man who had learned to perform authority without actually having earned it. He said things like synergize global directionality and optimize our impact vectors, with the confidence of someone who had never once been asked to explain what any of it meant. On his second day, he attempted to reorganize the International Accounts Division and discovered, in front of the entire department, that he didn't know which markets we serviced. He referred to our South Korea liaison as the guy from Singapore. He said it out loud. In a meeting. Without flinching. A cringe doesn't begin to cover it. But it wasn't the ignorance alone that gave me that cold, specific unease. It was the attitude that accompanied the ignorance. The total absence of curiosity. Marcus Bell didn't ask questions. He issued directives. He treated meetings like minor inconveniences and people like outdated office furniture, present, functional in a basic sense, but not worth examining too closely. And here I was. Mary Cooper. 17 years with Grayson Manufacturing. Senior translator and international liaison. My job description on paper was simple: handle translations for global clients, particularly high-stakes contracts and presentations. In practice, I was something far harder to replace and far easier to overlook. I spoke 5 languages fluently: Mandarin, Japanese, German, Spanish, French. But language was the surface of what I did. Beneath it was something that didn't have a clean job title: the ability to read a room across a cultural divide. To understand what a pause meant in a Tokyo negotiation versus a Buenos Aires one. To know when a German counterpart's directness was a sign of respect and when a Japanese partner's agreement was actually a carefully worded refusal. To hear the thing that wasn't said and translate it accurately. I had helped close deals that funded entire departments of this company. Deals that would never have survived a language software program and a cold email chain. Deals built on years of trust, on the kind of relationship that requires a human being who shows up consistently, remembers details, understands what matters, and communicates accordingly. But lately, I felt like a ghost. Marcus never looked me in the eye during meetings, never asked what I did, never sat in on a single foreign client call to observe how those conversations actually worked. At our last monthly roundtable, he cut my update short mid-sentence to ask the marketing director about font choices for a new campaign deck. I kept my head down, kept doing the work, told myself that professionalism would outlast arrogance. I was wrong about the timing. Wednesday arrived with no particular drama. I had my headset on, half engaged with a French business webinar, working through the translation of an executive summary for our newest partnership proposal into Japanese. It was careful, layered work, the kind that required not just accuracy but cultural precision, attention to honorifics, sensitivity to the way certain concepts didn't translate directly but needed to be rendered in a way that conveyed the same weight and intention through different linguistic and cultural architecture. I was in the middle of a particularly delicate clause when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Red heels. Clicking with slightly too much confidence for a first day. Lipstick that was bold and deliberate in a building full of muted tones. She moved through the office with the energy of someone arriving rather than starting, a scan of the room, an assessing smile that observed without engaging, no badge, no nervousness, just presence performed. HR materialized behind her with the apologetic brightness of someone presenting something slightly problematic wrapped in cheerful packaging. This is Lana. She's joining us as our new SEO specialist. She'll be working with the web team and assisting marketing. Lana gave a small wave and took the empty desk 2 stations down from mine. Rebecca's old desk. Rebecca, who had burned out 3 weeks ago under Marcus's new campaign for aggressive digital visibility and simply stopped coming in one morning. I had been sad to see her go. I returned to my work. I had no particular feeling about Lana, beyond mild awareness. People joined offices. People left offices. This was not remarkable. But Lana, it turned out, had a way of making herself remarkably difficult to ignore. By 8:45, she was on a phone call, on speaker, discussing dinner plans and her escape from what she described as a garbage agency. Her voice had the particular carrying quality of someone who had never been taught that shared spaces require some modulation. I glanced up, expecting the usual self-conscious adjustment when someone realizes they are disturbing others. She didn't adjust. By 9, she was leaning toward my monitor with the casual presumption of someone who had decided we were already friends. "You don't use Grammarly?" I gave a short smile. "I've been writing in 5 languages since before Grammarly existed." She smirked. "Right, but AI can't be that bad." I turned back to my screen. The comment didn't sting. What it did was register. I had barely spoken to her. And she was already establishing a dynamic, one in which my experience was quaint, my methods outdated, my expertise available for casual dismissal by someone who had been in the building for less than an hour. I filed it away and kept working. Then came the meeting. At 9:32, we gathered in the small conference room for the weekly strategy sync. People filtering in, murmuring good mornings, settling with their notebooks and coffee. I took my usual seat near the window, not the power seat, not the corner, just the spot where I could see the room and think clearly. Lana walked in behind me, paused just inside the doorway, looked around with the deliberate theatricality of someone who knows they have an audience, and said, just loudly enough to be heard by everyone currently paying attention, which was most of the room, "Oh, I guess this is the lifetime employee corner." Heads turned. A few people chuckled. The nervous, involuntary laughter of people who don't want to be seen not laughing. I didn't laugh. I looked up. Steady. Unhurried. "Good morning, Lana." She blinked. Then smiled. The warm, performed smile of someone who wants to reframe deliberate provocation as harmless banter. You've probably seen so many people come and go, right? I opened my laptop and pulled up the presentation.
She sat beside me.
Closer than the available space required. Her perfume was strong and clinging. She leaned toward my screen. What are you working on? I angled the laptop away. Internal summary. It's in Japanese. Oh, she said, dragging the syllables like she was chewing them. Google Translate must love you. I said nothing, because if I had opened my mouth in that moment, it would not have remained professional. She laughed quietly and leaned in again. Hey, don't look so serious. We're all friends here, right? And as she said it, her hand touched my arm, fingers resting just slightly too long, too deliberate to be accidental, too calculated to be friendly. The room, which had been buzzing with the ordinary noise of a workday morning, went 10 degrees colder in an instant. I moved away sharply. Meeting starting. Her smile didn't leave her face. But something in her eyes shifted, something sharper than amusement, something that was watching me with specific, practiced intent. Not teasing. Testing. She wanted me off balance. She wanted a reaction she could use. I had negotiated mergers between companies that barely trusted each other. I had translated threats delivered in the formal language of polite diplomacy. I had sat in boardrooms with executives who shouted across tables in languages they barely spoke and watched the whole room try to hold together. I was not going to flinch from this. I turned back to my notes. My heart was moving faster than I would have liked. Not from fear. From something sharper. Recognition. Because I knew this particular game. I had seen it played before in different settings, with different stakes. I just didn't yet know why she had decided I was the board to play on. Marcus arrived last, as usual. Sleeves rolled, tie loosened. The performance of a man who wants you to believe he has been too busy being brilliant to think about his appearance. He dropped a folder on the table without greeting anyone, sat down, and launched directly into it. We've got to cut deeper. A murmur moved around the table. No one made eye contact with anyone else. Executive directive from above. If we want to protect the international rollout, we've got to trim the non-core roles. Non-core. It's remarkable what 2 words can do to a room. I felt it land in my chest before I had consciously processed the implication. Lana raised her hand.
Casually.
The practiced gesture of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. I've reviewed the digital operations list. We're overlapping in several areas. Marketing automation has already cut localization time by 40%. With the AI integrations we've been piloting, most of the language workflows are already streamlined. Marcus nodded with the enthusiasm of a man who has just been handed a solution he was already committed to. Lana turned to me. Her expression arranged itself into something that approximated regret, the performance of someone who is about to say something difficult and has practiced looking reluctant. I mean, no offense, Mary. But translation. In 2025, there are tools that can do it faster. We should be reallocating those resources. And there it was. She said it with the same tone she might have used to suggest replacing a printer cartridge. Marcus didn't hesitate for a second. I've been thinking the same thing. We don't need dedicated translators on staff.
The tools exist.
It's not like we're translating Shakespeare. I looked at him, at Lana, at the assistant sitting 2 seats down who had gone completely still and was examining the table with the focused attention of someone who desperately does not want to be noticed. I felt every eye in that room find somewhere else to be. But I didn't flinch. I straightened my spine.
Closed my tablet.
Set my pen down. I understand, I said, very calmly, and stood up. Marcus blinked. I think he had been expecting something else. Tears, perhaps. Or protest. Or the low, desperate energy of someone trying to save their position. I smiled, small, quiet, the kind of smile that contains something that isn't immediately decipherable. I wish you luck at your next meeting, I said. He furrowed his brow slightly, puzzled by the specific phrasing. Lana smirked. The smirk of someone who believes they have won something. I walked out. They didn't ask where I was going. They didn't think to wonder what was coming. Monday was 3 days away. And they had absolutely no idea what that meeting was about to become in my absence. I should have kept walking.
I had my dignity intact.
I had a clean exit. But as I stood in the hallway outside that conference room, feeling the full weight of what had just happened settle into my bones, not as humiliation but as something colder, something more clarifying, I turned around. I went back in. Marcus was already moving on to the next item on his efficiency agenda. Lana was on her phone. The rest of the room was doing its best impression of people who had not just watched something unjust happen.
Wait, I said.
My voice was level, firm. The voice I used in negotiations when something important needed to be clearly understood. Marcus looked up with the mild impatience of a man who had already moved on. I'm not just a translator, I said. I am the liaison for our international partners. I've built direct working relationships with clients in Japan, Germany, Argentina, and South Korea. I am not giving them words. I am giving them context, nuance,
history, trust.
Some of these clients have never spoken to anyone at this company except me. They don't sign contracts without me in the room. That took years to build, and it is not transferable to a software platform. Lana rolled her eyes. Just slightly. The practiced micro-expression of someone performing boredom to signal that what they are hearing doesn't merit serious consideration. We have CRM tools and language integrations for that. You don't understand, I said, and I felt my voice crack slightly on the word understand, not from emotion but from the sheer effort of compressing 17 years of knowledge into a sentence that could be heard by people who had decided not to listen. It isn't about the words. It is about trust, about relationships, about the specific, uncodable knowledge of how a partner thinks, what they value, what silence means in their cultural framework, and what it doesn't. These partners will not respond to a cold email. They will not respond to an automated translation. They will go quiet, and you will not see it coming until it is already too late. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His expression was the comfortable condescension of a man who has decided the conversation is beneath him. Mary, I appreciate your passion, but no one is irreplaceable. You might be overestimating your own importance here. Overestimating. That word arrived like a physical thing, like something dropped from a height, as if 17 years of late nights, of mastered honorifics, of delicately navigated negotiations, of relationships built across language and culture and distance, as if all of it was simply a sentimental overvaluation of my own function. I stood there for 3 full seconds, feeling the truth of everything I had built press against the absolute refusal of the people in front of me to see it. And then I understood something. You cannot explain fluency to people who only speak in buzzwords. I nodded once,
turned,
walked out. They had no idea what they had just thrown away. But they were going to find out. The walk home was slower than usual. The city was bright, still full of afternoon light, but everything looked slightly desaturated, like someone had turned down the color without touching the brightness. My bag felt light. Oddly, pointlessly light. I let myself into my apartment and stood in the hallway for a moment after the door closed. The silence was different from the office silence. The office silence was inhabited. Phones and keyboards, and the ambient noise of people working. This silence was just absence. No buzzing work phone. No calendar alert reminding me about the Tokyo call. No email thread from a partner that needed my attention by end of day. Just stillness. I sat down on the couch, folded my arms around myself, and stared out the window. The questions came slowly, like water through stone. Could Marcus navigate the specific power dynamics of a South Korean supplier meeting, the careful hierarchy, the way decisions were communicated through gesture and implication as much as through speech? Could Lana explain the honor culture embedded in every line of a Japanese contract, the way a clause that felt routine in English carried an entirely different weight of commitment and expectation in its Japanese rendering? Could a translation app read the pause before a sentence? The particular quality of silence in a video call when a partner is processing something they have decided not to say directly? The buried meaning in a word that, taken literally, meant one thing but contextually meant something else entirely? I already knew the answer. The waiting was the hard part. That night, I barely slept. My phone was dark on the nightstand. I wasn't expecting a call, not yet. But I was waiting for morning. Waiting for Emily. Emily had been my closest friend in that building for most of my 17 years there. She had been in the room for my first promotion, had talked me through my worst professional moments, had understood instinctively why this work mattered beyond the job description. She was still inside. She would see what happened Monday morning when the Trident Group delegation arrived. Trident was not a routine client. They were one of the company's most significant international partners, a relationship that had taken years to build, that had required my presence, my cultural fluency, my specific and irreplaceable understanding of how their team communicated and what they needed from a partner. The meeting on Monday was a scheduled renewal discussion, a substantial one. At 9:04, her message arrived. He's here. Trident team walked in 2 minutes ago. I stared at the screen. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. 10 minutes.
20.
The blue bubble icon stayed still. Then something's wrong. I typed back immediately. What happened? No interpreter. They assumed someone else could step in.
Thomas isn't speaking.
Just sitting there. Alice looks furious. Thomas Delgado was Trident's lead negotiator. Alice was his trusted interpreter, not a staff translator but his personal colleague, someone he relied on to navigate conversations he didn't fully trust to anyone else. If Thomas wasn't speaking, it meant he had decided the room didn't merit his words. Another message. Marcus tried using an app. I kid you not. Alice didn't translate it. She just looked at him. My lips parted. Then the last one. Thomas said 4 words through Alice. We will not stay long. I set the phone on my lap. Let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. They were finding out. Without a single word from me. Without a single action on my part. Just the simple, inescapable consequence of removing the person who made something work and assuming the thing would keep working on its own. You cannot cut the voice and still expect the room to understand you. Tuesday moved slowly. I stayed in bed longer than usual, scrolling through my phone without absorbing much of it. Part of me wanted to hear that everything had collapsed, not from cruelty, but from the particular exhaustion of having told someone the truth and been dismissed, and needing some form of external confirmation that the truth was, in fact, true. By noon, nothing. No headlines. No desperate emails. No missed calls. Then, Emily, can I call you? We were connected within seconds. What happened? I didn't even bother with a greeting. She sighed. Everything went fine. The silence that followed was a particular shape. Fine. Not at first, she added quickly. When the Trident team arrived, Thomas looked around for you. He asked Alice. Signed it pretty clearly. Where's Mary? I closed my eyes. Lana stepped in, Emily said, and her voice carried a specific quality that conveyed her feelings about this without requiring any adjectives. She told them you'd moved on. Said the company had new tools in place. Showed them the translation software demo she'd found online. Described it as just as effective. I could picture it. The rehearsed ease of it. The way she would have tilted her head with performed confidence, citing a tech blog's promotional content, as if it were peer-reviewed research. Then what? Thomas looked at Alice for a long moment. I thought they were going to walk, but Alice nodded once. And they stayed. The deflation was physical, like something leaving the chest.
They signed, Mary.
Full renewal. Expansion clause included. I know, Emily said before I could respond to the silence. They only stayed because Alice took over. She did most of the navigating. She was smoothing it over, saving face for everyone in the room. It wasn't a win for Marcus. It was just survival. I sat with that for a moment. They had scraped through. Just barely. Through the intervention of someone else's competence, someone who understood enough to compensate for the gap I had left. But I knew what that meant. It meant Marcus would see a signed contract and conclude that he had been right, that the tools had worked, that I had been replaceable. Thanks for telling me, I said. Are you okay? I will be. But even as I said it, I knew what they didn't. They had built their confidence on a single meeting that had survived by a thread. They were constructing a future on a foundation that had been quietly cracking since the moment Marcus Bell walked in 15 minutes late and decided he already understood everything. When the fault line cracked, and it would crack, there would be no one left to translate what had gone wrong. I didn't have to wait long to find out how right I was. Wednesday morning, 7:13. My phone was already pulsing with alerts before I had made it to the kitchen. Emily's name at the top. I answered before the second ring. Everything's falling apart. No greeting. No preamble. The voice of someone who has been up since 5. I sat on the edge of the bed. What happened? A sharp inhale. The contract. The Trident deal. It's wrong. Wrong how? They signed the version Lana prepared, she said, her voice tight with a particular strain of someone delivering genuinely catastrophic news. The Japanese version. The one run through the automated translation platform. A pause. It wasn't accurate. The back of my neck went cold. How inaccurate? Multiple clauses. Profit-sharing terms misphrased. Oversight conditions switched. Limitations on operational control, literally reversed in structure. The software stripped the conditional language and replaced it with direct affirmatives. I understood immediately what that meant. In Japanese contractual language, the difference between a soft conditional construction and a direct affirmative isn't stylistic, it's legally and culturally significant. It changes the nature of the agreement entirely. So, the document says Trident has full decision-making authority.
Yes.
And a 3% performance bonus backdated to last quarter. That clause was never approved. I know. Her voice dropped to something close to a whisper.
They own us, Mary.
For the next fiscal year, they can revise scope, timelines, even staffing, and it's fully legal. Both parties have countersigned. It was handed to Alice after Monday's meeting. I sat there in the quiet of my apartment and felt 17 years of careful, meticulous work come into very sharp focus. All the things I had said in that conference room. All the things Marcus had dismissed with the comfortable condescension of a man who didn't know what he didn't know. Every warning. Every explanation, every careful, professional articulation of why this work was not what it looked like from the outside. What are they doing? Marcus is in emergency mode. HR locked the project folders. Legal is tearing through both language versions side by side. Lana is saying she only used the tools she was authorized to use. A pause. The CEO has sent 2 meeting requests to the Trident liaison team. No response. He called Alice directly. Her assistant said she was unavailable until further notice. I lowered the phone slowly until it rested against my cheek. Then Emily said, "They asked for you." I went very still.
What?
One of Trident's directors. During the follow-up discussion, they asked whether Mary Cooper would be attending the renegotiation.
I didn't speak.
Lana told them you'd been let go. Silence on the line. Do you know what they said? I waited.
Nothing, Emily said.
They nodded.
Politely. Quietly.
But the temperature in the room changed, the way a room changes when someone realizes something significant and decides not to put it into words. I could picture it exactly. The particular stillness of a Japanese business delegation that has received information it considers deeply significant and has chosen to process it without displaying emotion. The kind of quiet that isn't confusion. The kind that is a decision already forming. They're not angry, Emily said softly. They're insulted. Of course they were. Because the message delivered by Lana's explanation was not simply that Mary Cooper had left. The message was that Grayson Manufacturing had made a deliberate choice to replace 17 years of dedicated relationship building with an automated tool. Without consultation. Without transparency. Without any acknowledgement that the relationship itself, the trust, the history, the cultural investment, had value that deserved to be addressed directly. In the cultural framework Trident operated within, that was not a business decision. That was a statement about what they were worth. They're giving us a window, Emily said. But they haven't committed to anything. No agreement to renegotiate. No confirmed follow-up. Marcus is pushing for a video call with a certified interpreter. But the partners have gone quiet. I knew that silence. I had spent 17 years learning to read exactly that silence. It wasn't a pause. It wasn't a delay while decisions were made. It was the verdict, delivered in the specific language of withdrawal. The language of people who have decided that the relationship no longer reflects their values and are making their exit with the dignity that has always mattered more to them than the disruption of a visible confrontation. They'll cancel, I said. Not today. Not this week. Quietly. No announcement. Just gone. Emily was silent for a moment. I think so too. Thursday morning confirmed it. Emily's text arrived at 8:03.
Short.
The breathless quality of someone who has been awake all night watching something fall. It's over. She called before I could reply.
Trident pulled out, she said.
The Japanese deal is dead. They sent a formal notice through legal this morning. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. Read it to me. She cleared her throat and read slowly, as if the words required the weight of being spoken deliberately. After internal review and consultation with our board, we regret to inform you that Trident Group is terminating all pending collaboration with Grayson Manufacturing, effective immediately. This decision reflects what we consider an unprofessional handling of critical documentation, a lack of cultural respect, and a negligent attitude toward communication standards during the negotiation process.
She paused.
Then continued. The substitution of professional translation with automated tools during legal finalization, without our prior consultation, demonstrated a disregard for precision, transparency, and mutual respect. We can no longer proceed in partnership with an organization unwilling to prioritize integrity in its communications. The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't need to be filled. They named her. Emily added quietly. I looked up. Lana, by role. The SEO specialist. Their internal memo described her as displaying a dismissive attitude toward intercultural exchange, lacking the qualifications to facilitate the communication she took responsibility for, and failing to recognize the severity of her position in the negotiation. I let out a slow, controlled breath. And Marcus. He's been in board meetings since 7 this morning. Legal estimates potential losses of $12 million in projected revenue and expansion credits. And it's not just Trident. Other international clients are watching. Several of them were tied to that deal. It was a signal relationship. When Trident goes, the network around it starts to question. Of course it does. Because Trident was never just one client. They were a measure. A statement about the kind of company Grayson was, the kind of partner it could be trusted to be. When you lose that relationship because you chose speed over diligence and automation over trust, the story travels. It travels in the quiet language of decisions made over long lunches in Tokyo and in whispered assessments between allied partners in Seoul. And I wasn't feeling triumphant. What I was feeling was something colder and more precise than triumph. The particular grief of watching a preventable disaster unfold in exactly the way you had described, in the exact words that had been dismissed as emotional overestimation. They hadn't just lost a deal. They had lost face. In a cultural context where face was not a metaphor, where it was a genuine measure of integrity, reliability, and the basic decency of how you treated the people in your relationships, losing face was not recoverable through a press release or a revised contract offer. And here was the part that stayed with me, cold and unavoidable. I still could have saved them, if they had only listened. At 2:41 in the afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered. The voice was polished, careful, rehearsed. A representative from Grayson's executive office, calling on behalf of the leadership team. They had asked him to reach out personally. They would like to formally invite me to return in my previous capacity, or potentially an elevated role, depending on my interest. The company deeply regretted the recent oversight. On behalf of Mr. Bell and the executive committee, they wished to extend an apology. I let the word oversight settle in the air for a moment. Oversight, I said. We acknowledge that the decision to terminate your role was made hastily, and that the reliance on automated tools was misguided. Misguided. Oversight. The careful, sanitized vocabulary of institutions trying to acknowledge failure without fully inhabiting it. What about Lana? I asked. A brief, tight pause. Miss Fellin is no longer handling international accounts. Disciplinary review is underway. That's not what I asked. Another pause. What would it take for you to return? He asked. I stood up, walked to the window. The city was gray and blinking in the late afternoon light, indifferent, continuous, entirely unbothered by the question of whether I returned to Grayson Manufacturing or not. A formal apology, I said. Not a press release. Not a line in a memo. From her. To my face. She stands in front of me and says, clearly, for everyone to hear, that she disrespected my work, that she underestimated my expertise, and that her arrogance cost this company a relationship it spent a decade building. Silence. And financial compensation, I continued. Not a performance bonus. Damages. For wrongful termination and reputational harm. You fired me in a meeting in front of my colleagues. You let her use me as a punchline. You want me back? You pay for what that cost. We'll need to speak with legal, he said carefully. You do that, I said. And when you've done that, if you've done that, you can ask me again whether I'm considering returning. And the answer to that question will depend entirely on whether this company has understood, by then, what I actually am. A pause. Would you consider it? If those conditions are met. I let the silence stretch for exactly as long as it needed to. If you can't understand why I deserve both, I said quietly, then you never deserved me in the first place. I ended the call. I didn't cry. My hands were steady. My chest was clear. I picked up the notebook I had been ignoring for months, the one full of ideas I had always put aside because there was always something more urgent, always someone else's deadline, and I opened it to a clean page. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be recognized. I was deciding what I was worth. Friday morning, I hadn't planned to go back in, but they asked. They insisted. And something in me, not pride, not the need to witness their discomfort, but something more considered, decided it was worth looking them in the eye one final time. I wore black. Not for drama. For clarity. When the elevator opened onto the executive floor, the office was gathered. Not formally. No one had announced anything, but there was the quality of a room in which people had arranged themselves because they understood something significant was about to happen. Heads turned as I stepped out. Some with curiosity, some with the awkward, careful attention of people who don't know where to look. Marcus stood to one side. His face was the color of old paper. His hands were clasped in front of him. The CFO stood near the window, arms folded, expression set. But it was Lana who stepped forward. She looked diminished. Not physically. She was the same person in the same office. But the architecture of her confidence had come apart. She clutched a small stack of papers in front of her like they were providing structural support. Her blazer was slightly too crisp, the stiffness of clothing worn to borrow authority rather than express it. And in her eyes, when they met mine, there was something I hadn't seen there before. She knew. Mary, she began. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. I owe you a public apology. The room went very still. I spoke out of turn. I undermined your work in front of your colleagues and your employer. I dismissed expertise I didn't understand, as though dismissing it made it less real. I said things that were disrespectful and arrogant and wrong. Her voice caught slightly. I believed that tools could replace people. That efficiency was more important than understanding. That what I'd read about AI capabilities was sufficient knowledge to make decisions about work I hadn't ever done. And because I believed those things and acted on them without any humility or caution, I cost this company a partnership that took a decade to build. She looked up. Her eyes were bright, slightly. You were the bridge, she said. I burned it. I'm sorry. A murmur moved through the room. Someone nodded. Marcus shifted, opened his mouth, then closed it again. I looked at Lana for a long moment. Thank you, I said. It takes something to say that out loud. She nodded. A cautious, tentative opening of something. But I'm not coming back. The room stiffened. I don't owe this company another minute of my professional life, I said, and my voice was calm and carrying and entirely without anger. Anger would have suggested unfinished business. I was finished. I was invisible here for years. I was functional, useful, essential in ways that only became legible to you when my absence had a $12 million price tag. You saw my value after you lost it. And now you want to recover your reputation using the same professional you treated as a line item. I turned slightly so the whole room could hear me. I am not a rescue plan. I am not a symbol. I I am a professional who deserved respect before the cost became undeniable. A pause. And since we're here, I've already accepted another offer. Lana blinked. Marcus straightened sharply. The Japanese partners? He asked. They called me the day after they sent their termination notice, I said. They wanted to work with someone who understood not just their language, but their values. I will be overseeing their North American expansion. Somewhere in the room, something fell. A pen, I think. A small, involuntary sound from somewhere I didn't look toward. I didn't walk away from this company, I said. I walked toward something better. And I walked out. No applause. No ceremony. No dramatic punctuation. Just the sound of heels on polished tile, a door easing closed behind me, and the specific, earned lightness of a person moving forward. Trident didn't just offer me a position. They offered me a title that reflected what I had always been, Director of Global Cultural Strategy. A real role, built around the understanding that culture is not an obstacle to be translated around but a framework to be understood and honored. The first time I sat in a meeting with their Tokyo team as a decision-maker rather than a support function, something settled inside me that I hadn't known was unsettled. Not vindication. Not triumph.
Peace.
I built a team. I hired people who had been told they were too specialized, too niche, too quiet. Language experts. Cultural consultants. People whose value didn't show up cleanly on a dashboard. We built something together that was grounded in the conviction that fluency is not a feature. It is the foundation. Sometimes people from Grayson reached out. Some apologized. Some were just curious. Do you miss it? Not even a beat. Not at all. Because here is what I know now, standing on the other side of all of it. Your worth is not a number anyone else calculates. It is not a job description. It is not a line on a spreadsheet that can be cut when someone with a new title decides the math works better without you. Your worth is what stays in the room when you leave it. It is the relationships that hold. The trust that outlasts the building. The absence that, when it finally registers, is large enough to cost someone $12 million and their most important partnership. When I left Grayson Manufacturing for the last time, I didn't leave silence behind. I left a message. Respect people before you need them. Ask real questions before you assume you already have the answers. And never, ever, mistake the speed of a tool for the depth of a human relationship. Some things cannot be automated. Some bridges take years to build. And some people, when you finally realize you should have listened to them, are already building something better without you. If this story gave you that feeling, that clean, certain, deeply satisfying feeling of yes, that is exactly how it should have gone, smash that like button right now. Subscribe for more stories about people who were dismissed, diminished, and underestimated, and then went on to prove, quietly and completely, that the people who wrote them off had no idea what they were actually looking at. Drop your story in the comments. Have you ever been the bridge someone burned? Have you ever been the value someone only recognized after they lost it? I want to hear every word. And when you're ready for the next one, it's right there waiting. Another reckoning. Another reminder. See you in the next one.